please join me in welcoming Dr. Heinz Meng, who will speak to you on saving the Peregrine Falcon. Dr. Meng.
Thank you. One thing that was omitted, the Audubon Society elected me as one of the 100 conservationists of the 20th century. That includes a whole bunch of people. That was very nice for the whole 20th century conservation, that award that the Audubon Society gave. Now I think I'll just sit here. Very nice, and you can hear me. And let's see if I can get this started. Forward. Let's see if we can see what happens. Oh, there's the name of the book, and there is a peregrine falcon. That one happens to be a young peregrine falcon that has a brown plumage, not the plumage that the two in front have, which is the adult plumage. And that particular bird, her name was Eve. And in 1974, we released the first captive-bred falcons in the world from the top of the faculty tower here at the college. And the two, I named them Adam and Eve. So it was the first captive-bred birds ever released to the wild. And it was done right here on campus. So let's see. Press this forward. 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 How come I couldn't do that? Okay. This is a little bit off, but there. If you drive along Jolin Road, you'll see this mailbox, and that shows a falcon. I live on 10 Jolin Road, and there's our mailbox. There's an outline of a peregrine falcon standing on one foot, and it has a hood on the head. A hood is a cap that goes over the head that blindfolds a bird, and that's used in training the falcons for hunting, or some falcons that aren't as used to seeing people or reacting to various things. They are hooded, and then you can carry them any place, and no matter what's around them, they don't get nervous. But my falcons have overcome that, and I can bring them around and they can see everything. So, that's another thing. Let me try a reverse, see if that's going to jump in. I wonder why that. No, I wonder why. Oh, there's slid down. Okay. Back in 1964, that was a few years after the peregrine started to get very scarce, and in the 50s, they were practically gone from any place in the eastern United States. And I decided maybe if we could breed them in captivity, we could replace falcons back. But of course, the environment had to be cleaned up enough so that we wouldn't put them in the bad environment. And fortunately, eventually the government passed a law that DDT could not be used anymore. So, in '64, I added an extension to the original little building that I had here. This is our house back here. And this was a small house that I kept falcons in for training and for keeping them. Then I built this little section in here, which is supposed to be an experimental breeding chamber. And there are vertical bars on the window areas on both sides. And then inside there were ledges and perches. And I thought if I got a pair of young falcons I could put them in there. So I built this in '64, and in the fall of '64, I went down to Assateague Island, Maryland, and trapped 2 young peregrine falcons. I figured that if young ones, birds of the year, would perhaps be good candidates for breeding. And people thought, well, that's not going to work because they need wide open spaces to do the courtship behavior. But I thought, well, I can't build an area a mile high and so on. So I tried it. And then there was room in there, and I got a pair of young falcons, brown ones. A big one and a little one. And here in the front you can see this, the big one is a female, the little one's a male. But the young ones were brown. So I put them in there, in the chamber. 64. In 65 they got their adult plumage. In 66, another set of feathers. In 67, they started to get another set of new feathers. They molt once a year. But that's all they were doing. They were eating and bathing and flying around there. That's all. So I thought, well, maybe these young birds that were caught during the first fall migration, maybe they weren't the right candidates for breeding. So a couple of friends of mine that lived in British Columbia, they were falconers, and there were still quite a number of peregrine falcons along the west coast. The largest peregrine falcon population in the world, and these were known as the Peel's peregrine, Falco peregrinus peelii. Falco peregrinus would be the species name, but if you put a third name on it, the third name in the scientific terminology, the third name would be the subspecies. So the falcons that I got 2 young ones that were taken from the nest off the coast of British Columbia, called the Queen Charlotte Islands. There were still plenty of the peregrine breed there. So my friends, they got me a male and a female from 2 different nests, shipped in here. And in the meantime, I put a partition between these 2 areas here. So I had 2 chambers, and I put the passage falcons, the one I caught in '64, in here, and the new ones that I got in '67 in there. And in '68, these weren't doing anything, and these young ones got their adult plumage. In '69, they were starting to do courtship behavior. In '70, it was getting a little bit better. '71, they laid some eggs and produced some young ones. So those are the first captive bred birds that were starting to breed. The 2 that were in here, that we call the passage peregrines, because they were caught during their migration south, in passage. We just banded them and released them back to the wild. Took the partition out, so the other pair, they had the whole run of the place. So it happened, they were starting to breed, and that was really quite a nice thing to see that we actually were able to breed young falcons in captivity. And in 1972, I tried to get more than just a single clutch out of the birds. Normally the peregrines lay 4 eggs. So the first year, in '71, I just let them hatch their own eggs, and they hatched 4 young, and so on. And the next year, what I tried was taking the first set of eggs in 1972. I let them incubate them for about 4 or 5 days, and then I took the eggs, put them in an incubator, and all of a sudden, the eggs were gone. Some culprit had taken the eggs. In the wild, this happens sometimes. A raccoon, perhaps, or a raven gets to the nest and eats the egg somehow or breaks them. This happens early during the incubation period. The female, in about 2 weeks, will recycle and develop another set of eggs and lay 4 more eggs. And so the female from the Queen Charlotte Island, she did the same thing. She laid not 4 more eggs, she laid even 5 eggs, which is very unusual. And I let them incubate that second clutch. And they hatched those 5 young. And from that second clutch, we produced 5 young. And the first clutch, there were 3. So we had 8 young instead of the normal 4 young. And we call that double clutching. And this is the common thing that's being used now. By taking the first set of eggs away, the parents will recycle so they get double. In fact, some of them have tried triple clutching, and that works too. I don't want to get too much out of it, I don't want to get the female just to lose her weight and so on by doing that. So double clutching, but triple clutching, I don't approve of that.
Now that you've done that, have you any explanation for why the first set did not do quitting behavior?
I don't understand the question.
Your first set of Falcons that you got from Maryland, do you have any explanation for why they didn't?
Well, apparently the ones that had been flying in the wild and catching food on their own, they're used to the wide open spaces. All of a sudden, they were in an enclosed area and they could never relax like these birds are relaxed. Whereas the ones that were taken from the nest, they were in the nest. They didn't know anything about flying in the open spaces because they were taken when they were about 4 weeks old. They normally would leave the nest when they were 6 weeks old. And they were in the situation and feeding, and they never knew the wide open spaces. And they could relax because there was plenty of food. So that's probably what happened, yes.
When you're double clutching, do you introduce the first set of chicks back to the parents and let them raise them, or do you?
No, the second clutch, we just feed them and raise them, and the second clutch we let the parents raise them. And here's another thing. If the parents raise the young, then the young birds do not become imprinted. If we raise them, the young ones see the person feeding them and they become imprinted. Now what's involved in that? Imprinting makes the birds look at the handler as their parent. And when they get older, if you put 2 imprinted birds in a chamber and say, hey, go breed, well, they're not used to the other bird as being another bird and say, what's that? And the human is the one. So they react to the human. So you put 2 imprinted birds together, they will not breed. And if we want to release them to the wild, we can't put imprinted birds back because that's not going to work. They're used to people, and then maybe they see somebody walking along and they think, well, that's the person that's feeding them. So the ones that subsequently we had to release to the wild had to be not imprinted. But there were other nice things with imprinted birds. They would react to the parents. They would react to the person as a parent. And when we had, when they were laying eggs, of course the eggs were not fertile because they wouldn't react to another male because the only person they would react to was human. And the males would react to the human as a sex partner, and I could go in there with the male and bring food, chick, 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 during the breeding season, and he would land on my head and mate with me.
What did your offspring look like?
Pardon?
What did your offspring look like?
Well, they were bald. For one thing.
So the imprinted ones, are they used for zoos and things like that, or what becomes of them?
The pets.
Well, the imprinted ones, if we want to release them to the wild, we don't get them imprinted. But let's say we had some imprinted birds, and a friend of mine had a prairie falcon that had been laying eggs for several years in the spring. Then I said, well, why don't we inseminate this prairie falcon with some peregrine falcon from my bird that thinks I'm a female falcon. So I got some semen from the male peregrine falcon, and when the prairie falcon laid her first egg, we got some semen, and we introduced semen into her because when my friend went into her chamber, she would react to him as a wild falcon would react to a wild male. By putting her head down and her tail up, it was very easy with an eyedropper. When her tail was up, just give her a squirt of semen. And we didn't think anything would happen because, you know, different species don't work together normally. But what do you know? She laid 3 eggs and we put those in an incubator and we had 3 young.
Oh my God.
And 2 males and a female. And the female we named Maid Marian. Because we made Marian artificially.
Were those offspring capable of reproducing?
Yes, they are fertile, but they would have to be fed by other falcons the same way, so they wouldn't be imprinted.
What other ways would be an imprint?
But the nice thing about that, so we had a hybrid now. And subsequently, we did find out that they would breed and that they were fertile. And then, when we named this particular hybrid from a peregrine and a prairie falcon, we coined a name, a prairie grin. And I was giving a lecture one time to the Audubon Society members, and then I said, well, we named this one, and we called it a prairie grin. And later on, when I was finished, I heard a couple of the elderly ladies talking and said, you would think that Dr. Meng would know that it's peregrine, not prairie grin. But they missed the whole point. Then I thought, the best possible hybrid to be used for falconry purposes would be a gerfalcon hybridized with a peregrine falcon. So subsequently we did do that, and we got the gerperegrines. In fact, one of these birds is a true peregrine, Falco peregrinus peelii, the Peel's peregrine, the western subspecies. The other one is Falco rusticolus peregrinus. Rusticolus is the scientific name of a gerfalcon. So that one is a hybrid. But they both look exactly like a peregrine would look like. And I had, at home I had two, we hybridized 3 of them. And we produced a female and 2 males. And we have 1 male whose father was a white gerfalcon. Another male's father was a very dark gerfalcon. And the one that turned out to be a female, her father was a pale gray gerfalcon. Those are color phases. And the one that was the pale gray male with the peregrine, that one turned out to be a falcon that looked just like a peregrine would be. So one of those birds is not a true peregrine, but a hybrid between a prairie ger, a paragerfalcon, gerfalcon. The Jeannie is half gerfalcon and half peregrine, but in her size and coloration, she looks exactly like a Peale's peregrine would look like. All right, we better get going here.
What was the advantage of the gerfalcon?
Pardon?
The
Gerfalcon.
What was the advantage of why did you want to create that hybrid?
Because for falconry purposes of hunting with a trained falcon, I thought if we had the hybrid, one that was a bird that could wait on overhead and was very good at diving, and the other one was very tenacious and would follow the quarry, and those are the basic characteristics of those 2 species. And as it turned out, the hybrid had those two features. And the Arabs years ago, they wanted female peregrine falcons. They liked sacred falcons that they caught in Arabia during the fall migration. But now, the main falcon that they want are ger peregrines. They're better than the female peregrines because of their features. And most of the good hunting falcons, the best hunting falcons, are that hybrid. You heard a hybrid vigor and so on.
Now, would they ever intermix like that in nature? Or...
No. The only way that they would breed with each other would be if you had the identical hybrids back in the wild that weren't imprinted. But normally, the hybrids are imprinted. And in fact, there's a regulation that hybrids have to be imprinted or artificially sterilized. Nobody wants to sterilize them, so we just imprint.
Is it possible to avoid imprinting by feeding the young with, say, puppets or some other?
Well, they did that with condors.
Yes.
Right.
They made a head and then go in and, yes, you could. But the simplest way to get them from being imprinted is to use another peregrine to feed them. So when the young ones are hatched and they're 3 or 4 days old, we just put the young ones in with a peregrine. And usually the best mothers turn out to be imprinted male peregrine falcons. And Prince Albert I, it was a long time ago, he died of old age in his 20s, but he loved to feed baby falcons. And I would put 8 falcons in their baby ones and give them some day-old chicks, dead ones, but fresh, you know, and he would pluck them and feed the young ones. He enjoyed doing that. So all of those that were raised that way were not imprinted, and all of the ones that were destined to be released to the wild, of course, were non-imprinted, so we could release them back to the wild without any problem. So this is Assateague Island. This is south. This is Macadam Road down the middle of it. And the birds would migrate along here. This is the shore on the other side of the island, Maryland, and this is the island itself. And the falcons would migrate along, and they'd land on the sand dunes, and I was able to catch peregrines. And here we had to go over to the island by a little ferry. Nowadays, of course, there's a bridge there. And I'd go down there, and here we're down along the island, and I'd catch the falcons. The first one that I ever caught was to hide, here's along the beach, to hide in the beach holding a live pigeon. And when I felt that a falcon was coming, I was holding the pigeon and I made it flutter. But I had to hide. Where am I going to hide along here? I had to dig a hole in the sand, lie on my back, with a little burlap over my face, and I held the pigeon. So there was a little bump there where my head was, but it just looked like a hummock and my friend, of course, covered me up, and then he went away. And I watched the pigeon, and I said, "Hey, pigeon, when the falcon comes, you let me know." The pigeon says, "How's he going to know?" Well, he'd be sitting there, or she, and all of a sudden, she would, guess what the bird would do when a falcon was migrating down along the beach and the pigeon saw it. Pretend you're the pigeon and you see this falcon coming. What would you do? Just think to yourself.
Try to dig in the sand.
Try to dig in the sand. Yeah, that's one possible. What's another possible?
Try to fly away.
Pardon?
Try to fly away.
Try to fly away. Okay, those are two things. But normally they don't dig in the sand. But what else could it do? It would be almost like digging in the sand. Hiding.
Still.
Yeah, they freezing. They just squat down like this, be very still. Because if they didn't move, they wouldn't be attractive. The poor pigeon that wanted to fly away, with peregrines going 200 miles an hour, as soon as they go up, they would be eliminated from the gene pool. So you wouldn't be... So that would be something that doesn't happen. And of course, in the wild, this happens somewhere. I'm going to fly away. Well, they get weeded out. This is survival of the fittest, you know, all that. That's how it works. Anyhow, I'd see the bird starting to squat. And then I had the bird tied to my finger of my left hand. And I had the other leg there that I could pull. So I pull them from under the sand. We'll pull one that knock the bird off, and then we'll flutter. And of course, it wasn't a sand-colored pigeon. It was one that had some black and some white, so it was very conspicuous. And when the falcons migrated, if it was hungry and saw that, he'd come down there and he'd dive several times because they're not used to having the prey sit there. They're used to having it fly to catch it, but eventually they would come and grab it. And I'd wait until they grabbed it and stood up on the pigeon. And it was a little tricky, looking through the burlap. And I had to grab it, so grab both legs. But I could grab it, then I have it. I jump up out of the sand with a falcon in my hand. What do you suppose a wild falcon would do? When, here, I'm holding it. What would you do if you were the wild one?
Bite.
Bite? Well, let's say a big brown bear grabbed a hold of you. What would you try to do? Try to get away. I'm not going to bite you. I'm going to get out of here. And yeah, so the falcon first tried to flutter away. Then I grabbed two wings and so on. Anyhow, I caught two, a male and a female. Put them. That's how I got them. And I used to bury myself in the sand here. I don't know why this thing is just going halfway down all the time. But anyhow, I developed a peregrine trap. This is sort of a vest that fits. There's a slit there for each wing to go through, and down the bottom, the legs go through. And this is attached to a ball of string, and I could even when I was just sitting in the car, the falcon came by, I could sort of drive near where the falcon was migrating, or if they just came over, just throw that pigeon out of the window. Now here is the little box I had in the front seat of the car, and here is the noose jacket. And there's a string, there's a ball of cord there. And I had a pigeon in here, as you saw before, and I had 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 pigeons. And if I saw a falcon coming, I'd throw that out of the window. Of course, the pigeon would flutter, the ball of string would unravel. There, I've just thrown out the window. The pigeon is starting to flutter, there's the ball of string, that would unravel. It would fly, unravel, and the falcon, if it was hungry, could come and grab the pigeon. Sit on the ground, start tussling with it, and then I drive a little bit closer, and the falcon would see the car coming, and it usually didn't just let go of that because it had this food, so it would drag the pigeon along, that would unroll the string a little bit more. But if I got a little bit closer, then it would panic and let go of the pigeon. But some of his toes were through the slip knots that were on the back of the pigeon, on the leather vest. And then, of course, he was caught then when we run up and grab the falcon. Here's the falcon on there. The first thing they try to do is bite the neck. And falcons have a special notch in their beak, and they kill the prey by biting. So they're very efficient at killing their prey. The other hawks, they hold the bird with their feet, and they grab and they kill it that way. But the falcon just holds on to it. One bite, the notch in the beak of the falcon, one bite cracks the two atlas and the axis of the two anterior-most neck bones and bites right through the spinal cord. So one bite and prey's dead. So they're very efficient in their prey. There, I'm running over there to catch a falcon. There, got you.
You don't need gloves on.
No gloves, right. I don't want to hurt the falcon.
Oh, what about you?
That's me. Can't you tell the bald eagle and which one's a falcon? And the first thing we do is put a hood on the falcon's head so he can't bite, because the other hawks, they try to flutter away or use their feet. But the falcons, you hold the falcon, they'll bite. And a peregrine falcon, if they bite you though, you have a nice cut in your finger. That's right. And here, in 3 hours, we caught 7 peregrines. And these all happen to be young falcons. And I didn't have time to band them because they were migrating. So as soon as we caught one, we put him in a nylon stocking, had a hole cut near the toe, so the head goes through there, and they're hooded. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How many males do you see in this picture? 3. See, the little ones are the males. The male and a male and a male. That's important to know, because I said I'm going to pick the 2 biggest ones and hope they're male and female. That wouldn't work, but it's very easy to tell. In some species, the males and females don't have a great difference in size. Red-tailed hawks, for example. They are basically mammal catchers. In fact, they love field mice mostly. Normally, the male's a little bit smaller than the female, but sometimes the males and the females are even the same size. But in the bird-catching hawks, like the big falcons, like the prairie falcons and the gerfalcons and the peregrine falcon, it's very easy to tell the sexes apart. Like here, see, there's quite a difference in the size.
And does that show up right from
Pardon?
Does that size difference show up right from the beginning?
Yes, as soon as they leave the nest, they are fully grown. It takes us 20 years to grow up, but birds that are raised in a nest, as soon as they leave the nest, their body size is fully developed. The wing feathers might not quite be fully grown. But baby robins, when they come out of the nest, the body size is fully developed. Maybe the wing feathers aren't quite all the way out, or the tail. But in a couple days after that, they're out there. But people often don't realize that. You know, you see a baby rabbit or a baby puppy or something, or a cat, they grow up. But in birds that are raised in a nest, as soon as they leave the nest, they are fully grown. But this is different from birds that are not raised in a nest, like ducks and pheasants and so on. They are not raised in a nest, but as soon as they hatch, they follow mama around. And those birds that leave the nest as soon as they hatch, they are called precocial birds, from precocious. So shortly after they hatch and they're dry, they follow mama around. And this, of course, has a great advantage because if mama had to wait till all of the young had hatched, there would be some problems. And I often ask students, how come if you see a duck, mama duck with ducklings in back of her, a dozen ducklings, how come all of the ducklings are the same size? And a lot of the graduate students or undergraduates, they can't figure out that. Well, because an egg is laid, they don't lay 12 eggs in one day, like frogs do, or some other animals that lay a lot of eggs at once, or snakes or lizards. They may lay many eggs in a row because they all develop. And some of them, like some of the snakes, instead of depositing the eggs, they keep the eggs in their bodies, and the eggs develop inside the body, but they are independent structures inside of the body. They aren't connected to a placenta like in mammals. So the eggs have to be laid every day or every other day. Now, if you're thinking about this, how come they're all the same size? And the answer is very simple, but sometimes they don't. The birds do not start incubating until their clutch is complete. So robins, they usually have 4 eggs. They lay on Mondays 1 egg, Tuesday 2nd egg, Wednesday another. So in about a week or less, they lay the 4th egg, and after they've laid their 4th egg, the clutch is complete. In the meantime, they lay the egg and leave. But they don't start incubating, and the egg, after it's laid, can get cold. People say, well, what if it gets cold? Well, this is normal if the eggs get cold afterwards. The incubation does not start till the clutch is complete. And then incubation starts. And if after that time, when incubation is started for a couple of days, let's say, and then the eggs get cold, then the embryo is started to develop, and then if it gets cold, it dies. Before that time, so it's a very simple thing. Well, the duck lays an egg, covers the egg up with some down on there, goes away, eats and plays, oh, I gotta lay an egg, whoops, it goes back. And when the clutch is complete, how do they know when it's complete? I think, well, probably when the duck sits on the egg, there are enough stimulations on the breast. There are a dozen eggs, and oh, I got enough eggs, I'm going to stop. Of course, they don't think that way, but somehow more eggs do not develop, and then they start incubating. See how simple that is? But if you ask some of your friends, how come all the ducks are the same size? The eggs are laid the other days. I get all kinds of answers. Well, the duck knows this egg number 1, and they incubates this a little bit more than the other ones, and then they finally get up,
Smart.
you know. How do they know which one they mark over there? These are all funny things. It's obvious, but it's fun. So we have so much fun with something simple like that. Try that on your friends sometime. Okay, so I picked a little one and a big one. I think I picked the female that had brighter yellow legs than the other one. Not that it makes any difference. And the others we banded and let them go. And even after right after you take the stocking back off, put the hood on, they can put leather straps on their legs and tie them to a perch like that, and they can't fly off. Here we have the birds ready for banding. We have bands, and the ones that we don't want to keep, we band and toss them off. And along the beach, sometimes you see a bird sitting, and then if you go over there, here you see some feathers. What kind of feathers do you think those are? These are some tail feathers. And the old birds, you see an adult sitting on the beach. And you go over to where the bird is sitting and look at the feathers. Sometimes you might find a head or some of the wing feathers, or sometimes just feathers. The older birds, the adults, generally have sandpipers. The young birds invariably catch flickers. During the fall migration, flickers, they migrate along the coast, and they're flying over the sand dunes and young peregrines. When they see flickers, they go after them. And usually they can catch them because the flickers don't have a tree to land on and dart around the trunk. So the young ones are able to catch those. If they go after sandpipers, they don't have the ability at the young age to be able to catch sandpipers. But the adults are much better at that. And if they go after sandpipers, they catch them. And there are many sandpipers along there, not as many flickers. So the young ones almost always miss the sandpipers, the quicker flying and dodgy sandpipers, but the flickers are slower, so that's why they're the ones that catch those. Now, what's going on here? Oh, don't tell me. That happens sometimes. Sometimes in the case, it doesn't fall down. See, like the first one, they went partly down.
Is the gerfalcon about the same size as a peregrine?
The gerfalcon's bigger.
Okay, does that count it for why she's also bigger, or is it just
Well,
because she's a female?
There might be a little difference, but in the hybridization, we use the female peregrine falcon. So there's not much difference. So she is the size of a Peale's peregrine, and then the male is a Peale's peregrine. So there's no appreciable difference. Oh, there we have it now. And here's a painting that I did of a young peregrine that he just caught a flicker. There's the sand dunes and then the ocean. And she catches a flicker, and the first thing they do is bite the neck, and the flicker's dead. Then there's a little bit of blood around there, and they start plucking there a little bit, plucking a few feathers out, and somebody eat some of the blood there, and then pull on there. And oftentimes, as they pull, the whole head comes off. Thank you. And then they have their feet on the bird, and they have this head dangling in their beak. They don't know what to do with it. You can't swallow it, it's too big. They don't want to let go of the bird, so somehow it falls off, and they eat the rest of it. So I depicted that, and normally on these young birds, you see the headline lying there, they haven't eaten that. People say, aren't you a sadist? Why do you draw like that? Well, that's the way it is. You usually find the neck, the head off. And here's one of the motels we stayed at. They were rather reasonable in the rates. On the island, the hurricanes usually demolish the houses that people try to build on Assateague Island. And we go in the second story there. And that's just some more. And here's some of the birds hooded up and on a perch in the back. Now, here is where we put some of the young ones. In fact, this is one of the ones that was from the Queen Charlotte Islands. This was the male of the second pair that we got. His name was Lancelot, and the female was Guinevere. I like that because, you know, Lancelot and Guinevere, they were interested in what they're supposed to do. But anyhow, so they had good courtship behavior, and they were the first ones that were successful. This is how birds mate. The male flies on the back of the female and flicks his tail underneath the tail, and the anal opening of the two touch, and the semen is fills the last part of the intestine called a cloaca, and then as it touches, the semen from the male gets into the female and swims up the oviduct, and that's how the egg is fertilized. All birds do that. This was the female, Guinevere, and she was not happy when I wanted to look up there to see what was. She was good. And if you put your hand there, you'd have 8 talons and a beak in your hand. They defend their nest vigorously. And here's one of the babies up there, sticking his head out. This is Lancelot and Guinevere. Up here, inside of that, I had some one-way glass so I could see what was going on inside. And here's the first one we produced. His name was Prince Albert. No, it wasn't Prince Albert. First one was Prince Philip. Prince Philip. And he's just about, he was fully grown. Had down feathers here and so on. Big feet. And that made the news back in '71. Got a very nice letter from Prince Philip of England. He was very pleased that I named the first one after him. Buckingham Palace and so on. And here's Prince Philip with his feathers all developed. There I am with my bow tie that I used to wear. Because at that time, Dr. Gray, the chairman of the department, he always wore a bow tie. So I wanted to please everybody, students included. So I thought, I better wear a bow tie. I'd have a better chance of getting tenure and all that kind of stuff, you know. After he left, I didn't wear bow ties. String ties were. And there's a close-up of a young falcon. And the question I could ask students now, yes or no, is this a falcon or is it not a falcon? Well, you look at the beak, and you see that? There's a notch there. See the notch there and there? Those are the notches that I talked about, that the falcons have and the other hawk on this cutting edge here. This would be a smooth cutting. It wouldn't have the notch. It wouldn't have the notch there. So when those notches come together, that's what severs the spinal cord. And here's a picture of a young falcon, big feet. Yeah, and of course I drew the notches, and I'm very meticulous when I find it. It has to be right. And lots of so-called bird artists, they draw a falcon, and they never heard of a notch in the beak, and you just don't know it. I said, well, how come you don't do it right? Well, it doesn't matter. But sure it matters if you're going to do it right. But if you don't know about it, of course you won't do it right. And usually the first clutch we put in the incubator and we used 99.5 and 37.5. And we had to regulate the humidity. And here's one clutch and the second clutch. And here, after 31 days, the young one is in there ready to come out. And it moves its head around inside of the egg, and it starts to crack it open. And 2 days later, it cracks the egg all the way around, pushes, and out it hatches. And right at the curve of the beak is a little spot there. That's called the egg tooth. And all birds that come out of eggs, and lizards and snakes will come out of eggs. They have a little thing on their snout, so they can move that around inside the egg, and that severs the membrane inside the shell, and finally the shell itself, and out they come. Called the egg tooth. And as they grow larger, the beak gets larger, and that egg tooth, it's not a real tooth, and it just sort of scuffs off. Now here's a young one that's just hatched. I've removed the shell. And attached to the anus is this little plastic-like bag. And while it's inside of the egg, the waste products that are voided from the kidneys, they go down into this little fecal sac, so to speak. And the waste products stay in there. And this white material, this is the urine. As the bird is developing, they use yolk for nourishment, and it goes through the body, and then the kidneys filter out the waste product. And these are, this whitish material is uric acid. And after it's produced, it's then insoluble, so it couldn't be dissolved again. In mammals, the waste products consist mainly in the urine of urea, and that is soluble. So if birds produced urea instead of uric acid, this urea would go through the membrane and into the body and kill the birds. And those birds that happen to produce urea, that didn't have survival value, and there aren't any birds that do that. But if they produce the uric acid, that enables them to have all these waste products in the egg without it leaking back and killing the bird. When you see bird dropping, there's some dark material, which is the fecal material, dark black or brown, and the white is the urine. But if it were urea, you wouldn't have birds. So it's a very important feature. Then shortly after hatching, this little sac just drops off. There's a young one, we're feeding it. And instead of putting it in a chamber with the temperature all 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I just used a lamp. And right underneath it was 100 degrees. But if they got a little bit too warm, they could go to the side where it wasn't as warm. And here, I'm feeding these birds. And these are all imprinted. In the beginning, I was interested in non-imprinting. I didn't want to raise them. And later on, of course, when we wanted to release them, we have young ones that we had now. They were a little bit older. We could use that as surrogate parents. And starting from the mouth and down into the stomach or gizzard, halfway down is a chamber called the crop. So when the bird eats a lot of food, it goes down into the stomach. If the stomach has a heavy lining around it, it's normally called a gizzard. Like chickens have a heavy lining around it. And then those muscles can contract, and chickens and then many of the grain-eating birds swallow bits of gravel also. So when that gizzard contracts, with the grain and the little pebbles in there, that helps to grind it up. But in a bird that cracks bones and swallows the bones, you don't want to have pressure inside of there because the sharp edge of the bone could injure the lining of the stomach and cause problems. So those birds that don't have the hard lining around usually have more digestive fluids for dissolving bones in their stomachs. They're getting bigger, and they're both the same age, and one of those is a male. And you see the little guy, here's a male, here's a female. See, the feet are smaller and more colorful in the male than in the bigger feet of the female.
Can you use imprinted birds as surrogate parents?
Imprinted birds, yes, they could be. We just have to see if they would start feeding them.
They would recognize the birds as being their same species?
Yes, but it would be better to have non-imprinted birds.
How long would it take to imprint a bird? I mean, can you feed it the first few days and it wouldn't be imprinted? Or is it
Right.
away?
The first few days, it doesn't really get imprinted. And this was in, I guess in '72 in Life magazine, they had a big article of me feeding the baby falcons. And it told about second clutches. And there's two young falcons. See, this is the immature plumage. See the difference between the immature plumage and the adult plumage like you see in front of them in the live birds. Yes. That's right, yes, you agree. There's a faculty tower where we released the first bird in the world, captive bred birds. That's a famous tower. Some say, oh, what do you mean? Well, it is. And from the tower, top of the tower, here are the Millbrook Mountain, and this is a place where there were two eyries, or nests. Right there and there. Ever since I came to New Paltz in '51, there were two there. In '56, there were still two eyries, or nests. Falcons don't build stick nests like most of the other birds do, hawks do. They just use a ledge on a cliff. And if there's a little bit of gravel in there, they may scrape out some of the debris and make a little depression there, and that's where they lay their eggs. So in '56, there were still two eyries. In '57, this one was missing. '57, there was one. And from '58 on, there were no more. And they didn't come back till '98. The one farthest to the left that we saw here before. And right here's a dead tree, and right at the back of that, you can't really see it, there's a nice ledge. And if we flip a rope down there and swing onto the ledge, here we are in the ledge. And there's a couple of baby falcons. And there are lots of feathers, around blue jay feathers and so on. Yes. There's a young one. Not used to these big predators coming down and looking at them. They're frightened, so we banned those. But here is up on top of the faculty tower. I had a ledge, got some old doors from the orchards, and just sort of nailed them together. And put this over the top. And these were the two young, Adam and Eve. And they were raised by other falcons. And when we thought they were ready to release, we put them in here. And I could go up the faculty tower and drop dead day-old chicks or pigeon pieces through the wire when that was closed. And the birds didn't see where the food was coming from. Then on the day we thought they were ready to be released, I put bands on both of the legs and radio transmitters. Here's Prince Albert I feeding some baby falcons to get them non-imprinted. He'd love to feed them. There, he's bringing the skin-tailed chicks over to the young, feeding them. And here he's feeding a young Peregrine. And then we put on the other leg a radio transmitter. It had 2 batteries and the transmitter there. And then we put tape around there so the batteries didn't fall off, and then the long antenna. And the birds had these antennas on there, so that if they couldn't find the way back up to where they were released from, we could tune them in with the receiver. But, yeah, well, usually nothing happened. But in fact, the first ones we released from the faculty tower, there's a big chimney on the next to the campus school, going up here, and the two young ones would like to land on there. And one day we didn't find the male; we didn't know where he was. But I tuned him in, and the signal came from halfway down the chimney. And it just went halfway down. Found out later that the chimney, here's the opening of the chimney, then went down like that, and there was a little ledge this way, and then down to the rest, to the bottom. And the young one had stuck halfway down. How are we going to get that there? And when one of the firemen got up on top and tried to, he could see where that ledge was, they didn't know how to get there. We saw where it was, and later on that day, just in the evening, all of a sudden the signal came down from the bottom. He'd gotten the rest of the way down. But if we didn't have the radio transmitter on, we'd know where it was. Where is he? Of course, this was in the campus school then. And he would have been in there, nobody would have seen him. So that's why the transmitter was helpful. But this is a regular Fish and Wildlife Service band. It has a lock-on type of thing, so that I'm getting too wordy. I'll let you get out of here in a little while. But then after we took the radio transmitter off, then we put another band on, a plastic band, with the numbers on 4 sides. So with a telescope, we could just read what number that was to identify the individual birds. And there's a radio receiver and a directional antenna. And we just move it around, and where the signal was strongest, that's where the transmitter was, so we could locate where the bird was. And each one had a different signal. The second year, we didn't use the faculty tower. We went up to a ledge just below the Mohonk Tower and put a similar enclosure there. It's a little bit out of focus. And here's one of the young birds flying. That was Eve, the female. And the idea was, when they got old enough and got their adult plumage, they would probably nest in a place similar to where they were released from. And as they got older, they'd start chasing different birds. And there's a painting I did of a young peregrine diving at a magpie. I just happened to have a tame magpie, so that's why I use that for a model. And this is Papa looking to see how daughter's doing. And here's one of the exciting things you can see around peregrine eyrie. When the young are starting to fly, Papa may come back with a blue jay, and he catches the blue jay in midair, and he pulls the legs up closer, and while he's flying, he reaches down to the base of the neck and goes, one bite, blue jay's dead. Then when the young one sees him coming back to the nest cliff, this is a young female. I wanted to show the plumage and size difference. She'd come over, try to get the blue jay, and then when she got there, he would let go, she wouldn't have it, she'd fly to the ledge and feed on it. Previous to that time, before the young were hatched, while the adult female was incubating, he would go out and get food, and when she'd see him coming over the valley, she'd just fly out, he'd be up higher, and when he got directly over her, he'd just drop the food, and it would drop down, she'd watch it, and turn over and catch it out of the air. go to the ledge and feed it. Here's a young one. I'm starting to train that, giving it little bits of food. So come to me. And here the bird's ready. We can take them out. See, there's so many of these that are getting stuck. And here I'm swinging a lure around, which happens to be a dead pigeon. And the falcons are used to know that that's where the food is. They start diving at it. Then eventually, when they have several dives in it, it's quite interesting to watch them dive at it. Then I just slow the lure down and let the bird catch it in midair. It's called lure flying. Here is Maid Marian, the hybrid between a peregrine and a gerfalcon, the first one we produced. And she's an adult plumage, so just halfway between. More brownish looking, and different spots on the breast. This is a young peregrine. No, a prairie that we produce. Here's an interesting one. This one is the combination between a merlin, which is a small falcon, and a peregrine. No. A peregrine and a gerfalcon. Now, if you want to coin a name between a peregrine and a gerfalcon, well, what name might you make up between a peregrine and a gerfalcon? We had the prairie grin. If you get the right combination, you'll know right away. A ger and a peregrine. Think of half the name of each one. Put it together. Louder.
Persian?
A Persian. That's close.
A gurchin?
No, close. You almost had it? Come on, someone's got to get it. Half of each. Peregrine, that's close. Do it the other way. You'll laugh when you get it. Merlin, get half of that and a half of gerfalcon. Hey, that's always saying it.
Work down.
Come on, somebody get it. There you go. The young children always get it. Merger.
Oh,
Isn't that fun? There's a merger, yeah. A merger between a mer and a ger. Anyhow, I had fun with that. And we can go out hunting when they're trained. A couple pointers out in the sage grouse country. When the dog points, we just use one at a time. I just had two of them out there. My friend had these 2 pointers. We take the hood off the falcon, let it go up in the air. When it's up in the air, we go in front of the dog, flush the sage grouse, and the merger, not merger, in this case, the ger peregrine is up overhead. His father was a white gerfalcon, that's why he's so light. We flush the sage grouse. Sage grouse is going, he's chasing it. He's caught it. And he bit an artery and he got the little decoration. And here's this house I built later on. Guy Koliak, the wildlife artist, came up and said, hey, you know, you've got this little chamber, you can raise one. Why don't I give you some money so you can make a chamber with 4 breeding chambers? Or we could raise a few more. There's a pair of falcons in there. One of the young ones. In fact, this is a young one that was found on the railroad track on the west side of the Hudson opposite Poughkeepsie. And it was raised on the underside of the bridge. And it flew out of the nest and just about made it to the west shore of the Hudson. It was sitting on the railroad track. Then somebody called up about it, so I went and got it and fed it some more and got it dry. We banded it. This is actually a wild produced peregrine falcon a couple of years ago. There's another view of it. sometimes something happens that I don't know what we can do about it. Here's a peregrine landed on a power pole. And these silent monsters are there all the time ready if a bird lands on it. And lots of peregrines and other hawks are killed that way. Pigeons usually don't land there, or other birds, but a lot of them get killed that way. Out west, the eagles used to get killed that way. They'd land on it, and their wings were wide enough to short themselves out. So now they've modified the poles, but we hope that they can modify the local poles around here. This is right across the bridge, going out of town towards the Minnewaska. On the right, but nobody's done anything about it. Here's what happened when the bird finally fell to the ground. Here's a painting I did of a young falcon. Not a young falcon, an old falcon. Why is he standing on one foot? Because if he pulls that up, he'll fall down. There. Thank you. Any questions anybody have?
Are there a lot of peregrines around the Hudson Bridge? People say that they're...
No, there's just one pair because they established territories. And once established, they won't let anybody on their bridge.
Well, I was here at around 60, and I think you used to come with a Falcon for the art classes to draw, but that would not have been a peregrine, right? Did you ever have any other kinds of falcons? Or?
In the 60s?
Yeah, well, about 60.
Yeah, well, I had peregrines ever since I came to New Paltz in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
These are wild caught young.
Oh, you had caught them
On Assateague Island.
they're the ones you have to Assateague. Yeah. Okay.
But, I was trapping birds every fall and used some for falconry purposes, for training them, and others that they would just band and release.
I have another question. I thought these were red-tailed hawks, but red-tailed hawk would do that too, the way...
Well, they would bring the food in, and then the young ones usually scream. Normally, the adults, they aren't as maneuverable as the peregrines. So the old ones generally comes to the nest, and the food is there, and then the young ones come flying back into the nest.
What attracted me was the sound. It was
Yeah, the screaming. Yeah, one, and then they follow the adult back to the nest. Yep. Yes.
You can't teach an imprinted falcon on
Sure. Yeah, because they're imprinted to the person, so they won't mate with each other. But you can swing the lure around, and the food is there, and then you are like a sex partner, but they will still fly after it.
How do you get them back when they've caught their prey?
Well, you have a leash with a dead pigeon on it. You swing that around, and they dive at it several times, and then there's a weight on the other end of the thing. You can swing it up, the bird catches it, and just glides down to the ground. And normally the pigeon's heavy enough so they want to land on the ground. You wouldn't give them something very small on a line without a weight on it, because they might just fly from the tree. Then with a little weight on it, they can't fly off. And of course the pigeon is heavy enough so they would just land.
But when you're out in the wild, when you use it to hunt that sage thing, the sage grouse?
Yes.
How do you get it back?
Well, the bird is used to something being flushed by the falconer, and just bops it, and usually it knocks down and comes around and lands on it. And then it kills the bird, and then starts plucking, and the falconer comes up and has a nice fresh piece of meat, breast of a pigeon or something on there, and just slowly goes down. And here the bird is out on the grouse or the pheasant, whatever. There's a lot of feathers in the way. As soon as the falconer arrives, dinner is served, because the meat is already plucked and ready to eat. And the bird takes a bite of that, and then you raise your hand as it takes a bite. It leaves its prey, it gets up on your hand, it's eating. And you grab that prey and put it in your pocket, in your back.
Are the falcons affected by, like, the auto fumes and diesel fumes in a big city?
Well, they're up in the sky.
Because they're so high up, right?
After you first released the Falcons, why did it take so long for them to nest back up in the mountains there?
That's a good question. But most of the young ones that were raised from cliff site, not cliff sites, skyscraper sites or the artificial places, that's a sort of a place where they nested on, so they go back to the places like that. And on the bridges, there were ledges just like they were used to nesting on, so they selected bridges. And now with most of the bridges occupied by resident birds that wouldn't let other ones by, then some of the cliff nests become desirable, and now a lot of them are nesting on the cliff
So
sides.
how many pair up here now on the cliffs here?
There are two, one on the two original places, one on North Trap Mountain and one on Millbrook, and two again.
How much territory does one pair of birds, how far does their territory go?
Well, within a mile or two radius,
Oh.
they protect the area.
Were they looking at the slides? When you started the slides, the female particularly seemed to be looking, like the change in light, do you know if they can see that? or-
Oh, they should be able to see things, yeah.
So
They
fun.
see color.
Yeah.
Yeah, how'd you like that? Did you like that there, guys? Yeah.
You said one of these is a Peregrine?
Yes, the female. Now, I usually forget about this, but I'll want you. Hey guys, you waited very patiently. Yeah, look. They know something is afoot or abreast. Abreast is the word. It's breast of quail.
And they sling it too.
See how big their feet are? See, the bird-catching hawks have bigger feet than the mammal-catching hawks.
Oh,
For obvious reason, because if a bird-catching hawk has long toes, it can snatch birds out of the air easily. If the feet are tiny with those short toes, they can't do that. But if they catch mice, long toes are getting away from the underbrush. So we have the common small falcon we have around here is a kestrel or sparrowhawk, Falcos barbarius. Now it's preferred that we call them a kestrel instead of sparrowhawk. In Europe, an accipiter, one of the bird hawks, is called sparrowhawk over there. So now we call it the American kestrel and the European kestrel, different species.
what
But
about the fish hawks?
fish hawk, well, they have a special adaptation for catching fish. They have long talons, and the undersurface of the feet have spines all over it. So when they grab a fish, it's not going to slip from it, and then the talons will hold on to it. But the kestrel is a falcon, has a notch in the beak and pointed wings, which are characteristic of falcons. But they go after mice. That's their main food, even though they can catch birds once in a while. But they have very tiny feet proportionally, so if they dive down after a mouse in the brush and grass, their feet are tiny so they can get down and grab the mouse. So if they had long toes like the peregrines or the merlins, they couldn't get down there. But to catch a bird out of the air, short toes wouldn't be as effective as the larger ones, longer toes.
I have a bird feeder in my patio, and last year we had, it was either a red-shouldered or red-tailed sitting on our deck. And there was a period of time when we didn't have many birds. I called the Audubon Society, and they said it's because there was a hawk in the area. But then those hawks don't, do they go after birds, the big meteors, I mean the red-shouldered? Do
Well,
they hang around a bird feeder?
the most common ones that go hang around birds are Cooper's hawks and sharpshin.
Right.
You sure it wasn't one of those two?
No, this was one of the big ones.
They go, well, a red tail might come in once in a while. Red shoulders wouldn't be as inclined, but those big ones can't catch the birds. But the Coopers and the sharpshins can. And oftentimes around your feeder, you have the sharpshins and the Coopers. And I say, well, they come around your feeders because they feed on converted sunflower seeds. And people say, feed on sunflower seeds? I didn't know that. I said, no, not sunflower seeds, converted sunflower seeds. What do you mean, converted sunflower seeds? Converted sunflower seeds. The dicky birds come eat the sunflower seeds, and they convert them. And then the hawks come and eat the converted sunflower seeds. Now you got it.
Do these guys eat bone?
Sure.
They do.
Oh, yeah. You watch, there goes a part of the wing.
We've had quite a problem with people throwing trash into their corners. The bird will come along the side of the highway and be sitting there eating the garbage. They get nailed with a car, and they wind up over in the rehab unit.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be garbage. Quite often they'll catch something along the side of the road and maybe be sitting there, and then they eat that, might be a mouse or so on. And when they're ready to take off, they're sitting right next to the fence on the road. Instead of going into the road by the fence, they cross the road. And as the cars come by, they get hit. It isn't garbage. They just have to, they don't like to eat garbage.
What kind of birds?
Another group is coming in, right?
Yep. I think we're going to have to close. Perhaps Dr. Meng will stand by for any additional questions if you wish. Thanks so much for a wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.